Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the June 30th market update from Gordon Asset Management. Today, we're going to switch things up a little bit. So my name is Todd Zempel, known as Z. I manage the retirement plan division of our firm. Today, Joe's traveling, which is why I get the pleasure today to speak with you all. You can see on the screen my contact information. If you want to reach out, feel free to follow me on Twitter, shoot me an email, whatever the case may be. I'm always here to help. That said, because it is me today, not Joe, the disclosures are of particular importance. So again, this presentation for entertainment only. It's not investment advice. Me being the performing monkey that I am, rather than Joe, it is particularly important today to stress that point. Do not follow us on Facebook. Do not follow us on YouTube. If you do, give us a thumbs down. Do not email us at info@wealthqb. We will not provide any investment advice regarding this presentation. So with that ado, let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. As always, we're out there on social media. This presentation itself will also be available on YouTube if you'd like to watch this at a later date. Today, rather than diving into the details of the stock market and what happened last week versus this week, I thought it would be interesting just to take a step back and talk about some of the macro trends that I'm personally interested in following. And those trends are on the screen. So one of the things that I view as a trend that will shape the coming years in the economy is a move to corporatocracy from kleptocracy. I think we'll see this rotation away from a system governed by the political corrupt to a system controlled by corporations. I mean, we see that already to some extent, but as you'll see in the presentation, we'll talk about a few very specific examples of where I see this happening. Another macro trend that's out there is this move towards environmental, social, and corporate governance. So obviously there's post Greta Thunberg, there's this big move towards environmentally friendly corporations and running your business environmentally friendly. And of course, you know, we all like clean air, we all like clean water. That's not a bad thing. Also, we've seen especially in recent days, this move towards social justice. Post George Floyd, you know, there's now this big Black Lives Matter move. You know, we saw a similar movement post 2008 crisis in the Occupy Wall Street. And so this social movement is there. It's an undercurrent to everything that's happening. And now we're starting to see corporations involved as well. You know, we saw this week Coca-Cola is no longer advertising on Facebook due to some of the political things that are posted there. All of these corporate, you know, if you go out to most major corporations' website recently, there will likely be some main component to their webpage where they're talking about things they're doing from a social and corporate governance standpoint. It's also a big investment trend. So there's a lot of funds and fund managers out there that are now focusing on environmental, social, and governance factors. So I think that's a big trend. Another trend is the Great Reset, not to be confused with the Maoist communist revolution, the Great Leap Forward. That one is a little bit more nuanced. We'll talk about that in a moment. But essentially, what it is when we look at what all the figureheads, talking heads, heads of state, heads of corporation are doing and thinking, a lot of them are sort of on a similar page with where they'd like to take things in the economy and in the world, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Also, never let a good crisis go to waste. So that's been something that's been said and talked about many times. But we definitely see that in action right now as we continue to have major crises, and quite frankly, as we see crises invented out of things that aren't necessarily crises, we definitely see people taking advantage of that to make change. And then last but not least, there appears to be somewhat of a coordinated effort to neuter US economic dominance. That obviously that's a big phrase. That's a big statement. But we'll talk about exactly what that means and what I'm thinking. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is entertainment purposes only, not investment advice. These are my thoughts, not that of the firm. So I'd like to start off and just give you a quote from Klaus Schwab. So Klaus is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. For those who aren't familiar, the World Economic Forum is a group, again, heads of state, heads of corporation, movers and shakers, the elite of the world. They have this organization where they get together, develop policy, drive agenda, form agenda, and drive agenda. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this group would be akin to what was formerly known as the Bilderberg Group. So again, these are the shadowy elite driving the world and the economy. But what Klaus said, he said that the World Economic Forum is releasing a new Davos manifesto. So Davos is their big annual meeting. Anytime that anybody uses the word manifesto, I get a little bit uneasy, but that's what he calls it. So this manifesto states that companies should pay their fair share of taxes, show zero tolerance for corruption, uphold human rights throughout their global supply chains, and advocate for a competitive level playing field. So obviously all that sounds great. That's all very positive. That's part of the World Economic Forum agenda. Then Klaus goes on to say that the pandemic, COVID-19, represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. So this is the never let a good crisis go to waste piece. So a lot of very important movers and shakers are viewing this dilemma we're in as an opportunity to affect change. And for me personally, I was in college when 9/11 happened, and I remember the day I went in to class. The professor said, "Hey, there's planes hit the World Trade Center. This is very bizarre. We're not doing class today. Everybody go home." I remember going home, and from that point on, I was just glued into the TV for the rest of the day. And following that, it was the whole situation was just so sad, so surreal, so bizarre to me. It just really affected my life. One of the immediate outcomes was, hey, all these guys from Saudi Arabia and a couple from Egypt, I believe, hijacked these planes, flew them into the Twin Towers. Hey, we're going to war with Iraq. To me, it just didn't make sense. So I started asking questions why. What else is going on? What don't I understand? What aren't they telling us? And so questioning how things happen, especially in times of crisis, is really ingrained into who I am. I have a very low tolerance for BS. I am somewhat of a contrarian. I don't believe the talking heads. Another good example of this, just lack of trust is, we look at COVID-19. Early on in the process in the United States, what did they tell us? Hey, masks aren't required. This thing can't be transmitted through the air. Meanwhile, the government was behind the scenes buying up all the face masks and PPE for healthcare providers. Hey, I get that. Sometimes you have to tell little white lies to get the job done. And then, shortly thereafter, then they told us you must wear a mask. So the World Economic Forum, as I mentioned, what they are saying, and one of their objectives is this big, what they call the Great Reset, which has really three major components. So the first component is to steer the market toward fairer outcomes. So again, that sounds great. What do they mean by that? Well, the government should improve coordination amongst tax, regulatory, fiscal policy, upgrade trade agreements, and create conditions for a quote unquote stakeholder economy. and we'll define that in a second. But government should implement reforms that promote more equitable outcomes. Again, hey, that sounds great. These may include changes to wealth taxes, the withdrawal of fossil fuel subsidies, and new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. Okay, so on the surface, that all sounds great. But what do they mean by stakeholder capitalism? So stakeholder capitalism, they define that as it positions private corporations as trustees of society, and they view that as the best response to today's social and environmental challenges. So stakeholder capitalism would be different from historical Western shareholder capitalism, which is what we have here in the United States, where really the objective of companies in the economy maximize shareholder value and profits. Eastern state capitalism, so this would be the Chinese style system, that system more so entrusts the government with setting the direction of the economy. So what the World Economic Forum is basically saying is, hey, state capitalism, we don't want to go that direction. Shareholder capitalism, hey, those guys are greedy pigs. Let's come up with something different that benefits all of us in society. What's interesting is they're kind of taking this move, this rotation away from the Eastern style government-driven capitalism to corporatocracy, as I mentioned earlier. And we definitely have the firepower to do that. So the chart you see on the screen right now is the Wilshire 5000, which is basically all the stocks in the US economy. We look at their market cap, so the value of shareholder equity in all of the stock market, essentially, versus the GDP output of the United States. And you can see this chart going back to the 60s, essentially. The value, shareholder value as a function, as a percentage of the global or of the US economy is at near highest levels it's ever been. So big multinational corporations and mostly driven by the FANG plus stocks, as Joe mentioned on prior webcasts, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, others. They definitely have the firepower to affect change. Some of these companies are larger than certain countries in terms of their economic output. The second component to the Great Reset is to ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. And so what the World Economic Forum is saying here is that, hey, we have this crisis right now, this COVID-19 crisis. Rather than throwing money at the problem aimlessly, why not really focus in on where we're allocating funds to help the economy rebound, perhaps in a direction of green infrastructure. So this is the quote unquote Green New Deal that you've heard about. So, these are their words, not mine. Again, the point of me going through some of this information today is to show you and tell you what some of the world's elite are thinking. So these aren't my words per se. Then the third component of this Great Reset is to harness the innovations of the quote unquote fourth industrial revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social challenges. So the fourth industrial revolution is this idea that the World Economic Forum has that speaks to using technology and innovations, AI, to accelerate humanity, essentially. So again, all these things sound very nice on the outset. The fourth industrial revolution, some of the themes involved with that. And again, I think these are all very interesting themes from an investment standpoint as well. But the Internet of Things, connectivity, 5G, drones, neuroscience, quantum computing, virtual reality, digital identity, cybersecurity, sustainability, and blockchain. if you are interested in this, you can, if you just Google World Economic Forum, they put out all kinds of information. The matrix that you see on your screen out to the right, this is the matrix that they've created of the fourth industrial revolution. So these are all ideas and directions that, again, heads of state, corporate leaders, that they discuss, and this is part of their agenda, pushing the world in this direction. The last point I noted there, blockchain. So this would be the Bitcoin of the world. So this one is of particular interest to me personally. I'm just very interested in this, and the reason why is that both the UN and Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, they estimate that about 10 to 30% of all public contracts, so contracts to buy military weapons, et cetera, but they estimate about 10 to 30% of all public contracts value are lost to corruption. So you think about, okay, the politician gives a no bid contract to their buddies, and so the no bid contract has an exorbitant cost. So it's really a raw deal for the taxpayers. So these numbers have led the World Bank to conclude that curtailing procurement corruption is one of the most effective economic development programs that a country can adopt. So this is very interesting. So the World Economic Forum is saying that, hey, blockchain is potentially an option to help curtail some of this corruption. Again, on the outset, this sounds good. It sounds nice. It totally makes sense. And then as you can see, the last point, fully public and permissionless blockchains have limitations regarding transaction scalability. So what they're saying is, hey, Bitcoin, the biggest blockchain cryptocurrency out there, it has limitations. It doesn't work. But we can fix the problem by making these cryptocurrency blockchain networks less free market, and more private or hybrid. So this is an interesting trend. To take it a step further, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, they actually just released a working paper on digital currency 2 days ago. So again, if you're interested, you can Google this yourself and read it. But the IMF often works in concert with the World Economic Forum in delivering their agenda. But what's interesting, so this working paper outlines that many central banks are currently considering blockchain digital currency, so they call it BCDC. And so what this working paper does, it outlines reasons why central banks would consider a digital currency, as well as some of the technical and legal considerations for central banks to consider before deploying a digital currency. What's really interesting is when you dive into this work paper and you read, why would a central bank care to deploy a digital currency? Well, a number of things. Number one, they say enhance the payment system, increase efficiency and concentration, reduce the cost of printing cash. So you may have all heard this big trend to go cashless. Thumbing out COVID-19 tainted dollar bills obviously works in that direction as well. They also say to improve the effectiveness and implementation of targeted monetary policy. Hey, picture this: you have a world where we have some economic shock, and the central bank needs to step in and stimulate the economy. They can just literally, with a few digital clicks of the keyboard, so to speak, they can target monetary policy to individuals, which goes on to the next point, help distribute fiscal stimulus. So imagine this: one day your currency is worth $1, the next day your currency is worth $1.25, just magically, instantaneously via the blockchain system. They also mentioned that the current system with Bitcoin, Ethereum, some of the other blockchain blockchains out there, they're currently unregulated, so it is a bit the wild, wild west. There's state actors involved. There's the whole dark web ability to purchase things online that are very nefarious, things like that. So regulation, they view that as a value add. But probably the most interesting point that I saw in this report is they actually note one of the main purposes a central bank would explore a digital currency would be to reduce dollarization. So what that means is currently the US dollar serves as the reserve currency. So following World War II and the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, that agreement created the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, and as a result, they essentially named the U.S. currency the international reserve currency. So when you're doing international trade, it's usually done via U.S. dollars. The U.S. currency is also one of the most stable, steady currencies out there. So there's a high demand internationally for U.S. dollars always, because most people want to deal in dollars. Now, that demand for dollars actually gives the United States a leg up on dealing with economic issues and fiscal issues. So to some extent, it allows the United States to endlessly print money, and other countries will buy up the debt, and there's still high demand for the dollar. So we're able in the US to get away with a little bit more than other countries because there's always this demand for our dollars. Now, if we move into the direction of de-dollarization, now that could absolutely change things. So if we move from this situation where the US reserve currency is diminished, and we're now transacting via blockchain digital currency among central banks, that could put the US in a real sour spot. That could mean that our interest rates will increase because other countries will be less willing, and individuals and corporations less willing to purchase US debt at very low interest rates. So if you think about, the US national debt is on a 5-year pace to reach $30 trillion. If we lack the ability just to aimlessly print more money, and we actually have to increase interest rates in order to attract bond buyers, that could be a real bad situation. Next COVID-19 that happens, we won't necessarily be able to just gin up a few trillion dollars out of the blue. We're actually going to have to go out to the market and find buyers of that debt, which means we're going to have to pay market interest rates. Also, as a result, we could see rampant inflation as a result of our diminished capacity as reserve currency. So, these again are really big picture items. I'm not saying anything like this will happen today, tomorrow, even in the next 5-10 years. But I just read the information that really smart people that are known for driving the economy, driving the world, are talking about, and that helps to form some macro trends in my mind. So from an investment perspective, how do we play this? Well, number one, we can look at stocks that are consistent with that fourth industrial revolution. So these are the 5G stocks, the tech stocks, AI, neuroscience, things like that, disruptive innovation. So even in a time of crisis like we are now with COVID-19, there are occasionally really smart people that come up with really good ideas and that change everything. And so finding those people is a very difficult thing to do, absolutely. But when you do find those people and they run businesses and invent things, they do represent very interesting investment opportunities. They tend to be higher risk, but also higher reward. Other investment trends, hedging currency risk, potential inflation. How do we mitigate that risk? Also mega cap and multinational companies with fortress balance sheets. So the big corporations that again make up so much of the world economic activity, as they look at the political landscape and decide, hey, we can't rely on political leaders to drive the economy, drive the direction that we want the country to go in. We must take this upon ourselves. They will absolutely take the reins and do that. And I think some of this social and political turmoil we've seen lately this year really probably solidifies in a lot of these companies' minds that that is the direction they want to go. Also, the move towards ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors. That's a big investing trend. It's a hype word that's out there, but I continue seeing that trend to be interesting going forward. And last but not least, there's sort of the moral hazard bet. So you can absolutely play the don't fight the Fed play, which means that, hey, there's companies, opportunities, stocks, bonds out there that maybe on paper don't look so great. Maybe they aren't profitable. Maybe they are zombie companies, meaning they have just gobs and gobs of debt. But if you have a big government buyer that, like the Fed, that will step in and buy your debt, well, maybe that means there's an opportunity where you can get in on the cheap. Again, we call that the moral hazard bet because you're kind of having to some extent close your eyes and hold your nose and invest accordingly. But that is a real opportunity that's out there. That said, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I had for today. I wanted to keep it very light. I'm a macro guy. I like understanding how the world works and what's going on in the world. I'd encourage you, if you want more of this type of information, feel free to email us, call us. Happy to have a conversation. And going forward, as we have more of these weekly webcasts, we can drive the content in a direction that you guys want to take it. We're happy to take it anywhere. That's all I had today, folks. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you're a friend of the firm, thanks for attending. If we can serve you in any way, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thanks a lot, folks. Have a happy 4th.